And hi, everybody. Rick Sterling here, president of Western IM. And I'm just here to introduce Troy today because he's the guy you really want to hear. We're here today to look at another part of our Whisper application, Whisper tool. This is the second part of a 5-part series. And there's links, of course, available to the ones. If you didn't see number 1, it would be a really good thing to go back and actually look at number 1. Today, Troy is my partner, of course, in Western IM, and also our director of development, software development, and also the architect of the Whisper tool. So Troy's the guy you definitely want to hear talking about this today. A lot of information coming forward today from Troy on the Whisper tool. And of course, this is version 4 of the Whisper tool that you're seeing today. It's the newest version of the Whisper application. So Troy, over to you.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, just a couple of things here. I'll share my screen in a second, but I just wanted to kind of catch up from last week for those maybe that weren't there, or just a kind of refresher. Kind of what we went through last week was more of a kind of setup. We put a couple of types in our system. We created a couple of objects manually. And we're actually going to start right kind of where we left off in terms of where the system, the repository was at. But the kind of goals of today will be to look at a bunch of more data that we're going to add, because we're going to be looking at a spreadsheet. We're going to be looking at some databases. We're going to be looking at a SharePoint list site. And we're going to kind of try to bring all this data together and kind of build on what we did last week. You don't have to have seen last week to kind of follow on what's going on here going forward for today. But definitely go back in and watch that one. You can see how kind of some of the initial setup was done. So let me here share my screen. Okay, I think we're good. So again, yeah, we kind of left off last week. The only changes I made to this repository from last week is I made a couple of small changes to forms just for some data that we're going to be seeing today that we were going to bring in. As well, at the end of last week, Rick and I started discussing about a couple of other items and stuff that came up. I pulled a box here from in the office and we opened it up and found a binder. So I actually created that binder location. We talked about actually a binder object. We talked about locations, like that box was in my office. So I created a location object as well and put a couple of other things in here. But for the most part, we're going to kind of pick up where we left off last week. The main thing we want to do here, and in the data we're going to be looking at other things, the spreadsheet, and this is going to be our boxes. This was kind of a sample set of data from an Iron Mountain or Access kind of database dump into a spreadsheet that we're going to look at and actually bring in those boxes. I believe here, I'll bring up that to take a quick look at it. We're actually going to bring in all these boxes. I think there's about 10,000 boxes in here that we're going to bring in. We're going to bring in some departments from within our organization that's actually going to exist in a database, a SQL database, whether that was a back end of another application or a homegrown kind of application. We're going to look at a SQL database where we'll get our departments and actually some personnel. Me, Rick, and Brian, our general manager, is kind of in some database. We'll bring those in. And at the end of this, what we want is kind of start relating all that information together. The companies, the departments, the boxes, where those boxes are, and the people that are involved with it, and as well as the volumes within it that are going to be coming from a SharePoint site. Just bring this over here, our SharePoint site. The boxes actually exist in the database Excel spreadsheet, but the actual volume, the folders within that box are actually accessible on a SharePoint site here where people can request checkouts and check-ins for this physical information. So we'll actually end on this SharePoint site, bringing those in and actually putting those volumes within boxes. The main tool we're going to be looking at here, for those who do have Whisper, this is our data mapping tool. This is has been used in the past to help us do upgrades from previous version of Whispers. We've done some legacy database upgrade or ingestions into Whisper and that. So some people might have seen this, but you may not have, depending on kind of if you do currently have Whisper. But yeah, the data mapping tool is the main highlight of today. So let's actually open up the data mapping tool. Right now it's blank. We haven't made a profile or anything. I made some that we'll use later, but we're not going to start with creating our first one, where we're actually going to look at this spreadsheet of our boxes that we know we have at Iron Mountain and how can we bring that data in. So we're going to create a new profile here. So this is a little gear icon. Like I said, I've got a couple of profiles in here already, so I don't have to make every one as we go through these. But we're actually just going to create a new one here. I started creating these and numbering them, and I needed a 1B. So we're going to start at 1, where we're just going to get our box import. I'm going to create a new one here. Now, like I said, we're going to be looking at a number of different sources today, but we're going to start with this Excel spreadsheet of our boxes that we've gotten from Access or Iron Mountain. And here we can just browse to that spreadsheet. Let me just, I think I have it under Western IM, Iron Mountain, our test boxes here. So we're actually going to be looking at this spreadsheet. As we go through some of the other ones, I might come back here and show you how we can do SQL queries. API queries will be important for doing things like connecting to SharePoint or other sources. Our tables here, this is actually just the tabs within the Excel spreadsheet. So in this one, I currently have a couple of tabs across the bottom. I can access individual tabs by selecting a table. Map to, this is kind of where we're going to say, what is it actually going to be in Whisper? So last week we created our box type and put some metadata fields on that. We looked at this spreadsheet last week and we picked out a couple of the columns that were important to us that we're actually going to bring in that metadata and create a box here. So I'm going to start with this here and I'm just going to hit save and we're going to build off of this profile. So I'm going to select the profile we just created here. Takes a second. Like I said, we got 10,000 boxes, 10,900 something boxes in here. And we can see here all that this just matches up with what we had in our spreadsheet. What we want to do is we've told the profile here, we want to make some boxes from this information. From that, we want to kind of select the columns that line up with the metadata we created last week. So I'm going to start with the name here. So our name column, I'm going to use this legacy ID column here because we made it a unique ID in our database or in our spreadsheet here that we'll use as a name of our box. So you can see here as I kind of select columns to match up with metadata fields, we're actually highlighting green where in that spreadsheet data is coming from. As you're working through this helps you kind of make sure that every column got mapped somewhere. We're not going to map every column here. We're just going to map the ones that we've kind of taken a look at so far. So here, I'm going to scroll down. We have a box type here. We have a holding code. Here we've got major description, I think was the other one we looked at here, major description. So we'll just put this over to major description. To and from date. This is going to be really important. In this demonstration, we're actually going to classify these boxes so we can put more value to that dump we got from Iron Mountain. We want to know what boxes are ready to go. So we'll bring in the from and to date so we can use it for a classification later. Just going to save this here and I'm going to push go. So, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. We're missing a key. So key point here with this data mapping tool is, yeah, we've told the system query, this is where the data is coming from. This is where it's, what metadata it is for us. But we need a key. We need to kind of match on something. And this is key, for lack of a better term, on if we're adding or getting multiple sources of data. So if these boxes already existed in the system, what attribute here tells me that they already exist? And we're going to match on name. We're going to say our name is unique. So when I run this, it's going to check to see if that name already exists for a box. And if it doesn't, it's going to create a new one. Another one we often use as our key is a barcode. Barcodes are unique identifiers often. So sometimes we want to match on a barcode. So I'll hit go here. And we got it running away here. Like I said, this is 10,961 boxes. As you can see here, we're bringing in almost 300 a second. So this whole kind of run is going to take, less than a minute here. Some of the other profiles we'll look at will take a little bit longer. Some of the relationships that have to happen, they take a little bit longer. But for the most part here, we'll just let this run. And we'll get all 10,961 boxes will have been brought into the system with the metadata on them. Just make sure it completes here. You can close this at any time, so I'll close it before. It's still running in the background. So here on my All Objects tab, I'm just going to refresh this here. We can see now we've got all these boxes that are now in the system. I'll just select one here. Let me select one of these ones that have a legal hold code on it. We've got our from and to dates, our major description. So that's kind of the first step. This is how we're starting to get that information. We're going to add some more value to this. Right now in our spreadsheet, we actually have some information on things like department. Department's another one here. We've got departments. So let's actually, instead of bringing in our departments from this spreadsheet, we're going to go out to a database instead. So I'm going to take a quick look at a SQL database here where I've got my departments that are going to come in here. see our IDs and our names of our departments and stuff. And that kind of matches up with the data that we had sent out to Iron Mountain that we got back. So let's create our departments and continue building out some of the information. Let's bring in a bunch of information, then we're gonna relate it, and then I'll come back and actually classify some of it. Jump back into the data mapping tool. I'm gonna hop over the B here, we're gonna classify afterwards. Let's look at our departments. So again, this is just a profile that is, instead of an Excel connection, we're connecting to a database. So this is the database table here that we're looking at. And here, if I run this, this is gonna take 2 seconds to run because there's only 17 objects, not even 2 seconds. So we've created our departments. We can kind of take a look at what that looks like. Let me look at just departments here. So we've got our list of departments. But as I mentioned, in our spreadsheet, we actually haven't put the box to the department yet. We're getting there. One more thing I'll take out of the database. So maybe it's Documentum database that we connected to, or FileFast or anything like that. We've kind of taken some of this data from somewhere else here. So I'm going to create our users here too. We got me, Rick, and Brian. I'm going to hop back here. So let's take a look at that. I'm just going to refresh my filter. Look at personnel. So we've got personnel here. You can see here as I'm clicking on the icon here to try to expand them, they're not related to anything yet. If I highlight Brian here, we don't see any department that he's in. So the next step here is, well, let's actually relate this stuff. Again, we'll use our databases. So here under the personnel, we have the department code that user is related to. So let's put Troy into that department 6516 department ID, which the department ID is in the database already in Whisper. We're going to match on that. So last time we were matching metadata fields, and on this profile, instead of creating an object, we're creating relationships. I'm creating, or looking at departments. We're looking at actually the department ID. We're getting the department ID from that department ID column. We're going to get personnel ID, and we're getting it from the ID column. So when we run this, ideally, we're going to have all the users put under our department. So if I expand Brian here, now we can see that he's actually in the office department. Two different sources, two different kind of pieces of information from the Excel spreadsheet and the database, but now let's put all those boxes into the corresponding departments. And last week, we actually created a view where we wanted to see company, department, boxes, and volumes, and that's going to be our end goal here. I'm going to hop over to my, here we can see if I expand functional view, we only have Western IM in the one department. We haven't put the departments in here. We haven't put the boxes in the departments. So let's do that next. This one's the one's going to take probably a little bit longer to run. I think it's like 2 minutes to run this one. But just like we put people in departments, we're going to put boxes in departments as well. That Access database, Excel database or table that we had a department ID, and we have the box name, and we're going to match the box name to that column. We're going to match department ID to the department ID column, and we can run this as well. So we'll let this run here. Just as this run, kind of for anybody that's technical, we've got a couple of features in the data mapping tool that allow you to control some of the threading and stuff that goes on. If you're on, higher end computer with, better database connections or faster connections, you can actually throttle the interval times between checking threads and the number of threads that you can spin up and things like that, just in our preferences here. And we can actually adjust this on the fly. I can make changes to this on the fly to ramp it up or ramp it down if needed. So I'll let this run. Like I said, I can close this here. It's still running in the background. I'm just going to go back over to my All Objects tab. Things are running right now, so we might see some performance hit, but just to kind of expand on here, our accounts payable department now is starting to see some boxes in the accounts payable department. That's going to help our functional view. The one thing we noticed is we didn't have all our departments in the company so far. So all these departments that I had synced in didn't get put into the department. So I'm going to take a couple of these departments and I'm going to actually link them to our Western IM company. So we're going to move them to a Western Iron company so that our functional structure can start at company and then see the departments underneath it. So if I go into my functional view here and I expand here, we're starting to see how we've got our company as Western IM. We've got our departments came from our database. Underneath there, we've got our boxes that have now come from our Access database. And next step here is where we want to get some volumes, but you can see our structure starting to get built out. This is all just kind of coming from the data that we have around our organization. Again, the strength here, especially when we get into the electronic stuff next week, we can start seeing how everything can start looking at next to each other. We can see our boxes and volumes with our shared drives and our databases all kind of coming together here. Let's hop back into the data mapping tool here. This is probably slowed down because I was doing some other things here. So we'll let that run for a second. The one thing I'd like to highlight here is that we've been working on the relationships between things. The strong point here that we're going to look at in our spreadsheet is that we have additional columns here that gives us some more information about the classification of this. We've got column 2 and column 3 that actually match up to a retention schedule and a final action. And the DS here stands for destroy. So after 6 years, we want to destroy this object. So in our next one, we'll actually take these 2 columns and start making our classifications on those boxes so we can get reports on what's in Iron Mountain that we can destroy. Okay, I'll just stop it here. We've got 5,300 done here in 3 minutes. So we'll stop it here and let it, we'll use the ones that we've got so far and we'll move on to the classification that I said. We're gonna come back to volumes here. So let's add that information to our classification of our boxes. In this one, this is another type of profile. We looked at creating the object types. We looked at relating them. We're actually going to do some classification here. So we've got our box names. We've got our classification name and our final action. So we're taking boxes. We're looking for names in our legacy ID column. We want our retention code coming from column 2 and our final destruction coming from column 3. So let's just run this here. This one runs a little bit quicker. And what we want here is that I think most of this stuff is old data anyway. So let's take our 2 column. Boxes we want to see 10 years after the final base date. We like to call it a base date. This base date here we're going to use as our to date. I believe when we set it up last week, when we created the box type, we had on the left-hand side, we actually set the base date to be the to date. So we want to see that this one here is 2001, but the classification is 10 years. So show me 10 years after 2001 in a report that this box can go. Good opportunity to take a drink. Again, we're working with 10,000 boxes here. Maybe I should have toned it down to maybe 5,000 or so, but just want to emphasize kind of some of the performance things here. It doesn't take long to take a spreadsheet and a database and a SharePoint site, and then we're up to about 20 minutes here, start getting a full picture of our organization. Okay, so let's hop out of this. This is just finishing up. We're actually going to look at our classification tab. This is a little bit different than the view that we had before, the functional view that we're starting to build out. This is where we want to maybe generate a report from this tab to kind of say, show me what's ready to go from Iron Mountain. So here's all our boxes here. We can see we've got all of our classification codes. We've got what we like to call a projected date. So that first box that we're looking at, we had 2001. The job we just ran here applied the 10-year classification to it. So it's saying as of 2011, this box is ready to go. So I've got my projected date as of today, but say we're trying to do, let's go back a couple years here and let's pick something like 1996. Maybe this was 1996. 1996. So here we can see all the boxes that were ready to go as of 1996. Maybe we only want to see a certain destruction. Here, let me clear this actually. Let clear this here. Reconnect. Maybe we only want to see boxes that are classified as 10 years. We'll look at a little bit of the reporting in another episode of the webinar here, but essentially, basically, whatever you filter to on the left-hand side of the screen or what you're looking at on the right-hand side of the screen can anytime be exported into an Excel spreadsheet. Here, I've got a couple of templates, but if I just click report, it's going to take that left-hand side, and any boxes that I've met that meet this filtering for our classification will get put out to an Excel spreadsheet. We'll look at reporting in a different episode where we can actually show some templates and make it look nice. Okay, so let's take a look at our functional view here. So if I expand here, we can start seeing we've got all of our boxes and departments. We've got some stuff classified, but we actually have one more source here. Often that we don't want to just look at the box level information. We want to start looking at the volumes or the folders within it. I call them volumes with this just to kind of distinguish between an electronic file and a physical folder. So we're actually, or an electronic folder and a physical folder. We're going to call them volumes here. But on my SharePoint site, we actually had our physical inventory of volumes accessible by users on the outside, so they can request to check out a couple of volumes, for example. So we're going to take this information off of a SharePoint site, and we can see here we've got kind of names of volumes, but we also have boxes that they're in. So what we're going to do here, so we're just going to do this kind of one more time, but using a SharePoint site, is we're going to use our data mapping tool. We're going to look at our SharePoint volumes. Again, just like we loaded up the data from those other sources, this is coming from a SharePoint API query for anybody who's kind of interested. We talked about how we can have queries. They could be SQL queries or they could be API queries. And here I've just got a special one written that's giving me a couple of other metadata fields, specifically the requested column. So I'm actually going to create these volumes in Whisper and bringing them in where the title is going to be the name of the volume. Last edited, or last requested by is going to be who modified it last. And then the request column is whether it's been requested or not. So this is only 100, so that's already done. Oop. I just made it big. So if I go to my all objects here, we're just going to look at volumes. And here you can see we brought in all of those. And these all came from the SharePoint site. You can see here we've actually got 2 that have been flagged as requested. And I can see that they last modified by me. So I was the one that requested them. So let's actually put these under those boxes. Let's load up that data mapping tool and do that one last step to actually put the volumes into the box. And what I'd like to point out here is that you can see the box column, a lot of it's empty. So not everything here is going to get related. If we don't have information here, it just doesn't get related to a box, right? So where only these last, couple dozen folders are flagged as or labeled as being in a box. So only these ones are the ones that are going to get put into these boxes. These other ones will not get a relationship. So let's run this here. And we're going to start getting a final picture here of now that these volumes are related to box, our functional view that we built last week where we wanted to start a company, then we wanted to go to department, and then we wanted to go to the box and see the volumes within the box. We're starting to get a full picture of all of those different sources, whether it's a spreadsheet, database, that was another application, a SharePoint site, all can come together in Whisper to kind of be a central source of truth for all the information in the company. And again, that data mapping tool, one thing I didn't highlight, there's options here within the data mapping tool to say auto, and this will run every time you run a sync and can constantly go out and get that information from that database, from that spreadsheet. Maybe that spreadsheet is active and people are actively putting information in there. The SharePoint site, people are making requests on the SharePoint site. I want to be able to check to see if there's any new requests. All that can be done at any point. And again, because of that key that we've specified in our profile, it checks to see if it exists. And if it does, it updates it. If it doesn't, it creates a new one. We won't get into the destructive parts of it, but just kind of the idea here is that a lot of times we use this as an upfront tool to get the information, but it can also be used as a sync to keep active data that's out there still coming into our kind of central truth. So that's kind of the final picture. I know Rick and I here are going to have a quick conversation that took 25 minutes. We got all of our departments, all of our employees. I only had 3, and all of our boxes from Iron Mountain and all of our folders on a SharePoint site, all brought together here into a cohesive view at the end of the day, or at the end of 25 minutes. So Rick, are you there, Rick?
I am.
Yeah.
I am, Troy. So, you know, Troy, not everybody uses Iron Mountain, right? I mean, lots of people have things in other places. They may have their own record center. They may use Access. They may use, you know, if they're government organizations, maybe there's a corporate record center for the province, territory, whatever, somewhere that they use. But no matter what it is, they can use that data, right? They can just ask for the information from those particular locations and get it sent over to them in a spreadsheet format.
Yeah, definitely. So the source can come from anywhere. And if it's something you can get active, that was kind of where I was emphasizing, you can do a kind of live sync to these things. But often cases, yeah, it's that, hey, Troy, you control our boxes in your office. Can you send me a list of what you've got? You know, that can be then ingested to the data mapping tool to say, okay, we've got our boxes from our record center, but then we also got Troy's list of boxes that we brought in as well. Yep.
And I mean, the big problem that I see all the time is that people don't actually know what's in the boxes. So, I mean, telling stories, I remember a time, this is probably 15 to 20 years ago now, that I went to a large power company. I was working there doing some work, and the records manager indicated to me that they don't even know what's in the boxes that went to the record center, because the departments just sent them boxes in without an actual inventory being done of the information in the boxes. So now we've got boxes out there in a record center or somewhere else that we're not even sure what's in the boxes. We can't really be sure. So we got to validate probably what's in the box. So we may have a look and feel of some folders that are in, or volumes that are in a box, but we don't really know for sure that that's really what's there. And I know a lot of the provincial governments in Canada anyway have people there saying, wait, you can't destroy your boxes because we're not really sure what's in them. So everybody, in order to get destruction of the boxes, eventually has to go back and actually validate what's in there. So Whisper could probably help quite a bit in that regard too.
Yeah. So one of the things we were talking about last week was that my office was a location. What we can do is, okay, maybe these boxes, when we sync them in, we could have put a column there to say link it to Record Center. And then now that it's in Record Center, we can kind of go through and say, hey, let's deal with the finance tax department here that we have here. Let's say, let's take these first 10 boxes. Let's actually move those to Troy's office. So here I'm going to go move them to location. We're going to move them to, okay, it's not loading up. Let's give me 1 second here to reconnect. I just moved some stuff around in the repository while you're talking. So I'm going to take these first 10 boxes here. And I want to move them to a new location. We're going to say, we're going to move them from, I pushed refresh. Location. And now it's not syncing up.
So really, Troy, it's, you know, I mean, we want everybody, all the teams that everybody has, to be safe right now because of COVID, of course. And so we need to find a safe location to have those boxes kind of moved to, so that we can deal with that or do an inventory or validation of the boxes, right? So that would be the way, is we pick those kind of boxes that we want to have the record center send over to that safe area, whether it's in their own location, they've given us a spot, or whether it's somewhere else we've chosen to do the project. And we can have those pallet loads of boxes sent over to us, and we can do that kind of inventory validation on the boxes.
Yeah, exactly. So the classification tab is also a good way to look at it too. I just moved some to mine, but we can kind of narrow this down to say, okay, I want to look at a certain department and only the boxes with those ones, create a report, maybe a transmittal report type, a request, pull request report, send that. And then when it gets to us, we say, okay, those boxes have been moved to Troy's office. And from here, we can say, okay, from the information that we've gathered through the organization, the exercise, we can see here in this box, I expect to see these 7, 8 volumes. When I open it up, is that what I see? and that could
Right.
be part of the physical. But then this box down here, I can see, okay, there's no volumes in this. So when I open it up, maybe that's part of the, not just data validation,
Right.
but actually indexing the box, right? To say, okay,
Yeah.
in here
Yeah,
we've
because
got,
it's really true that sometimes you find inventory of information that never got inventoried before. Like in the course of the day, doing even a validation project, you may find a bunch of information that never existed before that Whisper could keep track of.
yep, yep. So we can say, okay, we found this box, and now within that box, we found that it had a binder and it had a volume and stuff within that box. So not only, you know, doing the polls and kind of validating, we can also build on what we've gathered from the exercise we just did. Yep.
Yeah, it's like the age-old joke we always have in the physical record side of the business about the finding the rubber boots in the box.
Yeah. Yeah,
You could
exactly.
actually log those in, and it's true, Troy. We could have all kinds of things, like we could have maps and drawings and all kinds of things, that we are inventorying for any organization. It doesn't have to be boxes and volumes, right? Could be maps, could be drawings out of an engineering department.
Yep. Yep. Very much so. We have implementations that have things like core samples, fluid samples. Yeah. It's unlimited. You get to create, it's very configurable in that you're not confined to a box and a volume in a box. You can have anything. One of the ones that I like to joke around and with demos sometimes, if I don't know what the client, industry is, that I'll often relate it to a astrological sign. It's a Capricorn. It's a right. Yeah.
Yeah, we also have clients, Troy, that still have corporate libraries as well of resource material that
Right.
need to be kept track of as books and periodicals and things like that. So
Yep.
that can also be done.
Yeah, definitely.
Like
And,
Whisper.
and to kind of emphasize some of the things we've been talking about here, what I did in the first 20 minutes was really focusing on data and sources. But what we're kind of talking to, and this is what we kind of talked about last week, is that some of that process stuff is way more important in a lot of cases than just bringing in a database. Like we're talking about the validation, we want to make sure we pull boxes and validate what's in there. That's the strong points of Whispers. It's so configurable that we get to put a personal flag on it. We get to see when it's ready for destruction. We get, see that it's in Iron Mountain or in Troy's office, not just the metadata, but also the process things that happen in the organization.
That's great, Troy. I'm going to be really interested and excited to see the third webinar in the series, which is going to be focused a little more on electronic information. Is that
Yeah.
what the plan
Yes.
is?
Yeah. So here, I'll put the link in chat here if I can get it for the next webinar. I'll also send around the email with the recording for this one and that. But next week's webinar, we'll do it on Thursday again this time. Next week is shared drive control, where we're going to look at viewing, organizing, adding value to uncontrolled content. So things like shared drives, where we had our data mapping tool. It was really nice for structured data and columns and rows. But what do we do when we get into things like folder structures and things like that? Yep. And then we'll put that right alongside this, just like we have our functional view here. We're at the end of the webinar tomorrow, we're going to have a shared drive that's broken out by company, department. And then under here, we're going to see boxes, and we're going to see electronic folders and electronic files all next to that. Yep.
I would also mention to those folks on the webinar today that if you have IT people in your organization that would be useful to have them view this, that you'll have the links so you can actually take it in with your IT folks to show them how easy it might be to link all that information up in the organization.
Bring your favorite IT guy to the webinar day.
Yeah, that's right. And food. I've heard bringing food also helps get everybody into that webinar as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Troy. That was really, really great.
Yeah, I like how we're kind of keeping these. I know we kind of specify an hour for these, but how much we can kind of get done here in 20 minutes in a quick talk is I think a lot more valuable than beating this even more.
Well, I thanks everybody for attending today, and hope you found some of this useful. And again, I'm looking forward to the next one, to have Troy show us the next kind of installment of the Whisper 4 features and benefits. Thanks, Troy.
Great. Thanks, everybody.